ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Isabella and I am the chairman, and Hafu is the timekeeper. This debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators, who are Miss Lowen, Miss Butterfield and Mr. Wood. The topic of the debate is that the Enchanted Games is a worthwhile endeavour. The affirmative seated to my right is from Pembroke, and the negative team seated to my left is from Pembroke. The speaking time for this debate is 8 minutes, with a double bell at the end of your speaking time. A warning bell will be rung once at 7 minutes, and a continuous bell will ring 30 seconds after the final bell. I declare this debate open. I call upon the first affirmative speaker, Seboroto.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, adjudicator and members of the audience. The topic for tonight's debate is that the Enhanced Games is a worthwhile endeavour. We, the affirmative team, define this topic as the Enhanced Games, referring to a proposed international sporting competition where athletes are allowed to use performance-enhancing substances and other technological or biomedical enhancements without the anti-doping restrictions under the World Anti-Doping Agency. We define the term worthwhile as something providing a suitable reward, including monetary, emotionally, or culturally, for the time or money invested into something's achievement. This definition being paraphrased from the Cambridge Dictionary. We define endeavour as actions directed towards achieving a goal, this definition also coming from Cambridge. In the context of the Enhanced Games, these goals hope to be achieved through the endeavour as outlined in their manifesto, including the promotion of athlete safety, athlete compensation, and embracing scientific endorsements while allowing performance enhancement. Hence, we define this topic as that the performance-enhanced international sporting competition, named the Enhanced Games, achieves its aims and goals in relation to athlete livelihoods and scientific development to an extent greater than that of the monetary and cultural costs. We, the affirmative team, absolutely believe this statement to be true. Tonight, I'll be presenting 2 main points: that the Enhanced Games will be better for athletes financially and economically through a guaranteed base pay and prize money that directly rewards athletes, rather than leaving them independent on unreliable national committees and sponsorships, and that the Enhanced Games will promote greater fairness for athletes through reducing the hidden culture of doping and eliminating the hypocrisy of punishing some athletes while others escape detection. Our second speaker, Vijay, will cover how the Enhanced Games promotes greater safety in athletics, turning secrecy into safety, and that it also promotes advancements in technology and medical research. Our third speaker, Zach, will rebut and sum up our argument. Now onto my first point, that the Enhanced Games will be better for athletes financially and economically. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, generates staggering amounts of money from broadcasting rights, sponsorships and ticket sales. Forbes estimated the IOC generated around $7.6 billion in USD in revenue between 2013 and 2016, the bulk of it from broadcasting rights. Yet despite this enormous revenue, the athletes, the people actually competing, receive no direct payment from the IOC. In other words, Olympians are unpaid workers at the centre of a multi-billion-dollar event. According to the IOC itself, athletes do not receive prize money from the Games. The only financial reward comes from their own Olympic committees or sporting federations, which vary greatly depending on the country. For example, the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee pays around $37,000 for a gold medal, but many countries like Sweden and Norway pay far less or nothing at all. Even when promised large payouts, athletes are often let down. A striking example is the UAE government's announcement that gold medals at the 2008 Beijing Olympics would receive $272,000, silver medalists $200,000, and bronze medalists $136,000. Yet there were widespread reports that these promised rewards were never fully paid out, leaving athletes and coaches dissatisfied. Furthermore, for the vast majority of Olympians who don't reach the podium, there is no money to be won whatsoever. This leaves most athletes financially vulnerable. A 2021 survey by the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee found that more than half of American Olympians earn less than $25,000 a year from their sport, with many forced to take part-time jobs simply to support their training. These are world-class athletes, competing at the highest level of global sport, yet most live in financial insecurity. This situation is even worse for those without a national Olympic committee behind them, such as the refugee Olympic team, established in 2016. These athletes, displaced from their home countries, have no national government to fund them, and they thus receive minimal support. Their participation is symbolic and rather than financially sustainable, underscoring how the IOC model leaves many of its inspiring competitors with nothing at all. The Enhanced Games offers a radically different model. With billionaire backers such as Peter Thiel and co-founder Christian Angermayer, the Enhanced Games promises a guaranteed base pay for athletes of at least $100,000 per year, in addition to life-changing prize money. Unlike the IOC, this model rewards athletes not for their marketability to corporate sponsors or their country's ability to subsidize them, but instead directly for their performance and commitment. This is a crucial shift. Even less successful athletes, those who may never win medals or attract sponsorships, can still make a living from their sport. For the first time, athletes who previously could not afford to dedicate their lives to training, including those from underfunded nations or displaced populations, will have a genuine opportunity to compete. Now on to my second point, that the Enhanced Games promotes greater fairness for athletes, both within and outside of the Enhanced Games. This change that the Enhanced Games provide doesn't just empower athletes financially, it also reshapes the incentives surrounding performance-enhancing drugs. Because the IOC provides no guaranteed payment, athletes are financially incentivized to place highly in order to attract sponsorships and endorsements. This creates enormous pressure to perform, and many athletes turn to doping to gain an edge. According to a 2017 study commissioned by the World Anti-Doping Agency, 44% of elite athletes anonymously admitted to using banned performance-enhancing substances in the previous year. In other words, doping in clean, quote-unquote, clean competitions like the Olympics is already rampant, regardless of the anti-doping regime. The Enhanced Games, however, changes this dynamic. By providing a guaranteed livable wage and significant prize money, it removes the desperate financial pressure that drives athletes to dope in secret. Those who are currently closet dopers for financial reasons will naturally migrate to the Enhanced Games, where they can compete openly while still making a stable living. This migration produces a positive external effect or benefit. Fewer dopers in traditional competitions like the Olympics, World Athletics Competition, and World Athletics Competitions Championships means these events become cleaner and fairer. Finally, this model also dismantles the unfair stigma that currently haunts athletes that are caught using performance enhancements. Lance Armstrong's case is a clear example. He won the Tour de France 7 consecutive times and even secured a bronze medal at the 2000 Summer Olympics. Yet when it was revealed that he doped, as did 44 of the last 57 Tour de France winners, according to Statista, he was stripped of everything, including his medal, his titles, and he was cast out as a villain. The hypocrisy of condemning some athletes while others evade detection undermines the very spirit of sport. In the Enhanced Games, this hypocrisy disappears. Athletes can be judged for their performance, not on whether they were lucky enough to escape testing. In conclusion, the Enhanced Games represents not just an alternative, but necessary evolution in global sport. The IOC model has proven time and time again to be financially exploitative, leaving athletes underpaid, unsupported, and forced into precarious situations simply to pursue their passion. By contrast, the Enhanced Games provides financial security through guaranteed pay and prize money, ensuring that talent and dedication, not sponsorship deals or national wealth, determine an athlete's ability to compete. Beyond economics, it also promotes fairness, both by reducing the hidden, dangerous culture of doping in traditional sport and by ending the hypocrisy of punishing some while ignoring others. Athletes deserve transparency, stability, and respect. For these reasons, it is clear that the Enhanced Games is a worthwhile endeavour. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Leela Adrani.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of tonight's debate is that the enhanced games are a worthwhile endeavour. We, the negative team, believe this statement is false and reject the affirmative team's definition, as we define endeavour as a utility not only to a business owner, but to society in general. As first speaker, I will demonstrate how the games are logistically unworkable and set a dangerous example, focusing on the health and safety of the athletes themselves. Our second speaker will address the cultural impacts, how these games promote exploitation and intensify societal pressures. Our third speaker will rebut the affirmative team's point and sum up our team case. The first affirmative speaker has attempted to argue that the enhanced games provide better financial compensation for the athletes who are currently underpaid. However, this argument is ridiculous, as creating lucrative markets for self-harm isn't economic justice. We could create well-paying competitions for any dangerous activity, but payment does not justify the activity itself. The enhanced games don't solve athlete compensation, they exploit it by making health risk profitable. Better compensation should come from reforming existing sports economics, not from creating new forms of physical exploitation. Athletes deserve fair payment for their skills and dedication, not for their willingness to endanger themselves for entertainment. I will be making two key arguments tonight. First, that the enhanced games encourage and normalize the consumption of unsafe drugs. And second, that they're logistically impossible, legally incoherent, and simply a recipe for disaster. Firstly, publicizing and permitting the enhanced games effectively promotes the use of substances that are potentially dangerous. Organizers may draw distinctions between acceptable drugs and illicit ones, but these lines are based more on history and perception than on genuine safety. Many substances permitted in the enhanced games, such as stimulants, carry risks just as severe, if not worse, than the drugs they ban. Consider cocaine, an illicit second-class drug, banned in the enhanced games, stigmatized in society, and well documented to cause long-term health damage. Now, compare with amphetamines, a stimulant-performing enhancing drug that is permitted in the enhanced games. Amphetamines are often justified as acceptable because they are less connected with the social stigma and criminal associations than cocaine. To be clear, I am not suggesting cocaine is in any way safe or acceptable, or that amphetamines, when prescribed by a doctor, are unsafe to take. My point is that allowing amphetamines while banning cocaine is a futile distinction, because both carry severe risks. Cocaine is simply more widely recognized as unacceptable, while amphetamines are mistakenly granted legitimacy. From a physiological perspective, this distinction collapses. Amphetamines can inflict equal or even worse harm than cocaine, raising blood pressure, straining the cardiovascular system, suppressing appetite, causing severe insomnia, fostering long-term dependence, and in some cases, death. Unlike cocaine, amphetamines have a longer half-life, meaning their harmful effects persist for extended periods, amplifying the damage to the body. So while society and regulators draw a line between acceptable and illicit stimulants, the difference is more about history, legality, and perception than actual safety, making the distinction ultimately futile. Now you may be thinking, but won't the games regulate these drugs? Yes, only FDA-approved drugs will be permitted. But FDA approval does not mean these substances are safe when consumed in high doses, under extreme physical strain, or without medical oversight. The reality is striking. In 2022, over 10 million Americans misuse stimulants, and studies show that high doses of amphetamines increase the risk of developing psychosis or mania by more than 5 times. If misuse is this widespread outside elite sport, imagine the pressure inside a competition where enhancement is the entire premise. Athletes would be pushed towards unsafe, untested dosages, consuming drugs without tailored prescriptions, ignoring individual differences in tolerance, and gambling with their long-term health. The result is irreversible harm. Regulations may create the illusion of safety, but danger remains as real as ever. But the problem lies deeper, taking us to my second point. The games are logistically unworkable. The so-called safety testing promised by the organizers is a medically impossible farce. There is no medical consensus on what a safe level of performance-enhancing drug looks like for elite competition. The real threat isn't just one drug, it's polypharmacy, the stacking of steroids, stimulants, and growth hormones, all at once. These combinations are untested, unpredictable, and incredibly dangerous. And their testing regime? Completely inadequate. The World Anti-Doping Agency, with a budget of over $40 million and decades of research, still struggles to keep up with new designer substances. A small private venture cannot possibly replicate this infrastructure. Their system will always lag behind, pushing athletes towards even more experimental, undetectable drugs just to stay competitive. The result is not reduced risk, but multiplied risk. Then comes the liability nightmare. No serious insurer will underwrite an event that deliberately promotes drug use. Organisers know this, which is why athletes will be forced to sign broad contracts, discharging the organisers of any responsibility. When catastrophic outcomes occur, strokes, heart attack, permanent organ damage, athletes will be left bankrupt and abandoned, while the organisers walk away with a profit. That is their model. And make no mistake, this is not just a civil issue. In many countries, supplying steroids and other controlled substances without a prescription is a criminal felony. Coaches, doctors, and organisers facilitating doping could face persecution as drug traffickers. Finally, the Enhanced Games both mock national and international law. How could they even be hosted in a country like the US or Canada, where controlled substance laws are strict and unforgiving? Would governments really suspend their own drug laws for a private sporting event? Legally and politically, that is impossible. And on a global scale, the Enhanced Games directly violate international treaties like the UNESCO Convention Against Doping in Sport, tearing apart decades of cooperation. And if all of that weren't enough, the Games would supercharge the black market. Underground labs will rush to supply these drugs, not only to elite athletes, but to amateurs, gym goers, and young people. What begins as a spectacle for a handful of competitors will spill into a wider public health crisis. The Enhanced Games don't just allow doping, they expand and normalize the entire doping industry. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. When the organisers of the Enhanced Games promise safety, legality, or fairness, it is physically not achievable. The reality is catastrophic health risks, a logistical nightmare, and fuel for the black market in dangerous drugs. Far from being a bold new chapter in sport, the Enhanced Games are a dangerous regression. For the sake of public health, the Enhanced Games are not a worthwhile endeavour. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Vijay Wittgenstein.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that the Enhanced Games is a worthwhile endeavour. We as the affirmative team believe this statement is undoubtedly true. As the second affirmative speaker, I will recap our first speaker Seb's points and convince you that the Enhanced Games is a worthwhile endeavour because turning secrecy into safety is a worthwhile endeavour. But first, I will rebut the negative team's case. First, I'd like to acknowledge that I have declined our definition, but have simply reworded it, and we would like to accept these minor amendments they have made. Now, the first negative speaker has tried to claim that the black market will thrive off this introduction of the Enhanced Games, however, has provided absolutely no proof whatsoever to support this claim. No studies or anything support this claim that the black market will thrive, and actually in reality it is only top medical companies that will be supplying these performance enhancing substances. They have also claimed that there is some perceived health risk that doctors do not support. However, in reality, in a study that I will later refer to, 74% of doctors actually support treating enhanced athletes. She has also claimed that there is a lack of information in regards to performance-enhancing substances, but in a study that I will later also explore, caffeine was once banned in sports, and this led to a lack of understanding about how it can be applied for athletes. However, only after this ban was removed, that athletes were actually able to that scientists and doctors, sports medicine scientists, were able to understand the actual effects of caffeine on athletes, similar as it will to legal amphetamines that are FDA approved and safe for athletes. She's also claimed that there is a lack of responsibility. However, the founders of the enhanced games, such as Aaron D'Souza, has made it explicitly clear that doctors must operate in the public eye to ensure that they will be held accountable for their actions, unlike the doctors who are amongst shady medical teams and doping illegally and cheating in competitions. Now to summarise our first speaker, Seb's points. Seb has already explained that the enhanced games is worthwhile because of the fair pay and financial security it provides for athletes, and how it will create a more fair environment in mainstream athletics. Now to my argument. As I mentioned before, I will explain how the enhanced games will create a healthy environment for legal performance-enhancing substances to be taken, and how this environment will allow for greater research and medical development in the realm of performance-enhancing substances and beyond. Now to my first point. The enhanced games is a worthwhile endeavour for athletes because it will strip away the lies of dangerous underground cheating and promote transparent, honest, and healthy substance use. In professional sports, particularly in athletics, it is no secret that the use of doping is rampant and out of control, as Seb has already claimed. Despite these strict requirements by the World Anti-Doping Agency, these are ineffective. A peer-reviewed study published in Sports Medicine in June of this very year, Health and Performance Challenges in the Era of Human Advancement, that specifically aimed to evaluate the appropriateness of the enhanced games, reported, citing a plethora of journals, the unacceptable frequency of performance-enhancing substances in the international athletic community and in competitions. Doping rates of up to 18% in the 2011 and 2013 World Athletics Championships, up to 44% at the 2017 World Athletics Championships, and up to 57% in the 2022 Pan Arab Games. This is only increasing, and because of this, it means that honest and hard-working athletes who have no choice but to compete along these dishonest cheaters, who are seldom poor. The Enhanced Games provides a legitimate outlet for enhancement that turns cheaters into challengers. Instead of cheating, athletes who want to take performance-enhancing substances have a stage where they can pursue their biological best and legal best honestly and safety. This issue of safety is by far the most important for athletes, and one that the founders of the Enhanced Games fully understand and take pride in supporting, unlike the Olympics. Rather than having athletes enhanced behind closed doors, amongst shady medical teams who prioritise being discreet over genuinely caring for their athletes, participants in the Enhanced Games are blessed with ongoing health monitoring, dosage control, pre-use screening, that make their participation even more worthwhile. Additionally, every athlete's doctor will operate in the public eye, as I stated, to ensure accountability and prevent negligent and shameful practices that are occurring in the mainstream world of athletics every single day. Desperate Olympians every year are finding sneakier and more dangerous ways to enhance without being caught, whether it be with FDA-approved substances or dangerous veterinary steroids that are yet to be tested on humans, as we saw last year with American sprinter Arian Knighton, who was taking steroids made for animal growth. The global athletics community must strive to find a way to protect these athletes, and we as the Affirmative team believe that the Enhanced Games is the very solution to achieve this, that will turn secrecy into safety, which is truly worthwhile. Now to my second point, that the Enhanced Games will act as a catalyst for advancement in medicine of performance-enhancing substances and beyond. Despite the negative stigma held by society surrounding the use of performance-enhancing substances, even in controlled, legal and safe manners, the vast majority of sports medicine professionals actually support this type of enhancement. The study I alluded to before, Health and Performance Challenges in the Era of Human Advancement, surveyed a total of 323 healthcare professionals from 46 different countries. 82% were sports physicians, and among whom 74%, as I stated, were willing to treat these enhanced athletes and support them. Additionally, as I previously mentioned, there will be constant monitoring of athletes' health and recording the effects of the substances. Enhanced Games CEO Aaron D'Souza, who I mentioned, ensures the state-of-art medical profiling such as cardiac imaging, rhythm monitoring, brain imaging, and genomic sequencing that will take place. However, the negative team has tried to argue that this is impossible. This controlled environment turns risk into research, transforming substances that were once thought to pose harm into sources of valuable scientific knowledge. And this is what makes the Enhanced Games truly worthwhile. Anabolic steroids, for example, are also used to treat muscle wasting diseases. Human growth hormones are used to treat growth deficiencies as well. These legal, FDA-approved substances will be in the front and centre at the Enhanced Games, demonstrating how proper oversight can replace danger with discovery. Elitists in the International Olympic Committee would rather remain ignorant to the wonderful health benefits of performance-enhancing substances, just as they always have. Take caffeine, for example, which I mentioned, and while this may sound ridiculous, the prospect of an athlete consuming caffeine between 1984 and 2004 outraged the International Olympic Committee and the World Anti-Doping Agency, and it was not until constant criticism that health professionals were able to properly investigate the effects of these substances in a real-world setting. And the German Sports University of Cologne claims that the removal of this ban itself is what actually allowed scientists to pinpoint optimal dosage. And this can be with caffeine, and this can be and this can occur with more substances as more bans are removed. Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing more frightening than ignorance masquerading as authority. It is only by embracing this controlled enhancement at the Enhanced Games that sports can truly advance. Now to my conclusion, the Enhanced Games is not just a new competition, rather it is a research-rich endeavour that will provide groundbreaking support for safe, regulated and legal use of performance-enhancing substances. Doping in the world athletics is way out of control, and the outlet the Enhanced Games will create will be a worthwhile endeavour, not just for the athletes participating, but for those who wish to refrain from performance-enhancing substances in the Olympics and World Athletics Championships. Additionally, the medical data provided will allow for the Enhanced Games to do wonders in the world of scientific advancement, as we've seen with caffeine. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not turning a blind eye to cheating. No, it is embracing the safe, honest, and legal use of enhancement. This Enhanced Games will turn cheaters into challengers, risk into research, and danger into discovery, which is what makes it, without question, a worthwhile endeavour. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Isabel McEwen.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that the Enhanced Games is a worthwhile endeavour. We, the negative team, strongly disagree with this statement. I will start with some rebuttal. The first affirmative speaker stated that the current Olympics already use performance-enhancing drugs, so we may as well make it official. This argument commits the naturalistic fallacy. What exists isn't necessarily what should exist. Some people drive drunk. That doesn't mean we should create drunk driving competitions. The presence of cheating in traditional sports doesn't justify institutionalised cheating. Most Olympic athletes complete clean, and anti-doping efforts represent society's commitment to fair competition. The Enhanced Games don't solve the problem of cheating. They abandon the principle that fair competition matters. They normalise what should remain condemned and create a false choice between realistic harm and principled standards. The second affirmative speaker stated that the Enhanced Games will be safer than underground doping because of transparency and testing. Bringing dangerous practices into the open doesn't make them safe. It normalises and scales them. The Enhanced Games won't replace underground doping. They'll expand the market for it by creating new categories of legal substances while athletes still seek undetected advantages. Transparency and harm isn't harm reduction. We wouldn't create legal fighting tournaments without safety equipment just because underground fighting exists. The Enhanced Games legitimise dangerous practices, making them more attractive to broader populations rather than containing existing harm within smaller circles. Back to my arguments. Our first speaker today has addressed the health risks and logistical issues of the Enhanced Games. Today, I will be discussing 2 points. Firstly, the Enhanced Games are built on exploitation. I will break this point into 3 levels: financial coercion, pursuit of power, and exploitation of humanity. To start, it is exploitation through economic coercion. We acknowledge that the sporting industry is far from perfect. Research from the University of Toronto revealed that athletes are uniquely vulnerable to sacrificing their health. The problem with the enhanced games is they don't solve this. They take the worst parts of sport and turn it into a business model. As an athlete's income depends on their contracts and job offers, they can be pressured into dangerous choices just to stay employed. Now introduce the enhanced games. As drugs are a requirement to compete, this pressure becomes worse, creating a relentless cycle. Consider alcoholics. Most start with just a little. Even drugs created to help people, take opium for example, inevitably lead to overuse. Likewise, the enhanced games capitalize on the addictive nature of performance-enhancing drugs. An athlete starts with one cycle of drugs, but the very nature of competition means if your rival takes a dose to get ahead, you must take a stronger one to keep up. They will take 2, and now you'll be forced to take 3. There will always be someone, somewhere, willing to take a greater risk for the chance to win. This isn't about freedom. It's a terrifying forced escalation where athletes are trapped by financial desperation and are pushed to gamble more and more of their health just to stay in the game. Countries and sponsors can pressure athletes too, creating a system where the only choice is how far an individual, corporation, or nation is willing to destroy an athlete to win. This leads to something even more dangerous, to the exploitation of athletes as a tool of power. The critical flaw of the enhanced games is its lack of shared governance. Unlike other sporting bodies, it is a privately owned commercial venture. As supported by PwC, without a democratic or transparent structure, the organisers are accountable to no one but themselves, creating a dangerously corruptible system. When ultimate control rests with a private entity, the incentive becomes profit, not athlete welfare or fair competition. With no anti-doping rules, the inconvenient need for integrity is no longer present. This leads to a chemical warfare, where the human body acts as the battlefield, transforming athletes from individuals into weapons of the state. The East German doping program of the 1970s and 80s, where thousands of athletes were unknowingly doped, shows what the enhanced games would institutionalize on a global scale, the complete erosion of human dignity in pursuit of power. And finally, who does this entire system ultimately serve? Us. We become the final willing participants in this exploitation. The demand for bigger, faster, and more extreme spectacles will be insatiable. Reuters Institute's report highlights how the media values athletes for their entertainment potential and marketability over their humanity. The enhanced games would only formalise this, risking creating a culture where we, the public, are entertained by the potential for catastrophic injury. This system teaches us to applaud the ruin of the human body for profit. It exploits our basest instincts and calls it sports. As consumers, we are often naive. We only see the athlete on the screen, never the long-term damage, the hidden corruption, or what is happening inside their bodies right now. The games send a terrifying message. Your health is less important than my entertainment. And this leads me to my second point. The enhanced games destroy our sport, culture, and future. Sport is not just a game. It is a centuries-old cultural institution that teaches fundamental human values: discipline, perseverance, fair play, and sheer human effort. Replacing the foundations of sport with chemicals takes away respect for the athlete. It stops being about human effort and becomes a race to see who can take the strongest drugs. The pride of winning through merit disappears, and the face of sport and society changes for the worse. As the World Anti-Doping Agency stated, this is a betrayal of everything that we stand for. The entertainment economy is a zero-sum game. There is only so much viewer attention, sponsorship, money, and cultural bandwidth. The enhanced games, with its shock value, spectacle, and million-dollar bonuses, will inevitably drain these resources from traditional sports. Both simply cannot exist together, creating a precedent where traditional, clean sport becomes a relic. And what message does this send to a child? Look at any playground. Children do not simply admire athletes, they internalise their values and emulate their behaviours. Icons like Nadal and Federer are revered because they represent the triumph of human discipline and dedication. They teach our children that greatness is earned. The enhanced games tells that child that victory isn't found in the practice field at dawn, it's in a syringe. A systematic review of the National Institute of Health found 76.3% of all substance-related content positively depicted drug use. The enhanced games will become the ultimate glorified advertisement for performance-enhancing drugs, exacerbating this existing problem. It would mainstream and normalise what we should be condemning. As USADA's CEO Travis Tygart stated, this carnival comes at the expense of kids across the world thinking they need to dope to chase their dreams. And what happens when adolescents and children are exposed to the enhanced games and, due to the award money and fame given to those using performance-enhancing drugs, decide to try it? Their brains aren't fully developed, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for risk assessment and long-term decision-making. They are biologically primed to seek reward and underestimate consequences. Steroids may not produce a high, but they can cause severe addiction, as the Addiction Centre warns. This prevents adolescents from competing in non-drug sanctioned events, effectively trapping them in the enhanced games. We have an obligation to protect vulnerable children who cannot grasp the lifetime of medical and psychological harm, as my first speaker explained, that the enhanced games will enforce upon them. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, the enhanced games are not a worthwhile endeavour. They replace merit with money, excellence with exploitation, and humanity with hype. They create a world where the poorest are pressured to poison themselves, where dictators have a new tool for oppression, and where we are asked to applaud the degradation of the human body for profit. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Zakim.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that the enhanced games is a worthwhile endeavour. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe this statement to be true. Tonight, I'll begin my debate by pointing out some of the flaws in the negative team's arguments, followed by a summary of our team's case. The negative team's first speaker has talked about how the enhanced games poses health and safety risks. The opposition argues health and safety are issues, but the alternative is far worse, as our second speaker talked about. Doping continues underground, unregulated and dangerous. Elite cyclists like Lance Armstrong use techniques such as washing their blood with saline to reduce the parts per matter concentration of drugs in their body, which is something he did, and there's been a lot of research on this. And this actually, as the negative speaker talked about the heart and kidney problems of these methamphetamines, of these drugs, this also causes these issues. Where do we draw the line? We need to make sure we are promoting healthy use of drugs if they're going to be used anyway, which it is clear they are, because as our first speaker said, 46 of the last 55 Tour de France winners were doping. That is an extreme statistic. The enhanced games, by contrast, would regulate and monitor athletes with full medical teams. This doesn't increase the risk, it reduces it comparatively. They also continue to repeat the phrase, if misused, in this point. This is the problem with their argument. This is going to be backed by research, it's going to be backed by mandatory doctors. It is not going to be misused, unlike it is in current systems at the moment. The first speaker also talked about the legal issues and regulations. But legality is not a measure of worth. Women's suffrage in the UK was illegal in the 1910s, yet few would now say that it was not a worthwhile endeavour to push for. Similarly, professional boxing, a little bit more related to our point, was banned in many countries until safety standards evolved and it became mainstream. The same logic applies here. Regulations change as society adapts. Much of the current legal opposition comes from outdated fears of society, which research and events like the enhanced games can overcome. Additionally, surrounding a point of based off these past outdated views is actually a fallacy, an appeal to tradition. The negative team's first speaker has also talked about how an incentive is bad as it's risking danger. The thing is, it is a choice. People have their own right. They have their own right to choose. And they have said that it's going to encourage people, but it's currently in the system we have right now, as our second speaker said, we're encouraging them to use it unsafely to try and get an edge in the games where they don't have regulation and they don't have these doctors. We are encouraging safe use. It's still happening. We have to consider what the fine line is in between. We have to find an alternative. We've already proven it is more safe this way. The first speaker also talked about logistical problems. But these do not undermine the worth of the enhanced games. Every major sporting innovation has faced similar hurdles, yet has proved viable once properly organised. With the negative team's mindset, when Thomas Edison was making the light bulb, he would have stopped at number one. We need to keep on pushing. If money is raised as a concern in this process, we need to look at who's backing this. We have billionaire backers, as our second speaker mentioned, like Donald Trump Jr., who have openly supported and even invested in this product. With private funding available, logistical challenges are not a fatal flaw. This money can help the research, which the negative team has mentioned is going to be an issue. But this is not logistically impossible, as I said to say, because we have so much money behind it, as our second speaker said. They also brought out this issue with insurance and how you have to sign a form, these big forms. What do you do when you're scuba diving? What do you do when you're skydiving? You sign your life away. This is not a new concept. This is just something that they've reworded to try and fit into their argument. The negative team's second speaker has tried to say that has stated that drugs are a requirement to compete in these Olympics. Let's look at the manifesto, which they obviously didn't do. What does it say? The founder actually encourages people who are natural to go into the competition, such as Noah Lyles, because they want to see what the difference is between the two. The negative team's second speaker has also tried to say, in a rebuttal to our point, that it's still cheating. Cheating has changed over the time. Look at athletes in the past. Spikes used to be illegal. As our second speaker said, caffeine used to be illegal. We can't have these traditional mindset that the negative team has adopted. We have to adapt. We have to innovate. And this is what the Enhanced Games is doing. She also berated the Enhanced Games for being a privately owned elitist organisation. What is the IOC? It is the same thing. How are they arguing this when they're not looking at the direct comparison? The negative team's second speaker has also tried to say it undermines and diminishes Olympic achievements and takes away from its own meaning. Far from undermining the Olympics, the Enhanced Game would actually protect and elevate them by separating doping and non-doping spheres, which, as I said, represented 46 of the last 55 Tour de France winners. Records, clean athletes' records are no longer overshadowed by suspicion, and they are also no longer overshadowed by those other athletes who beat them through these enhanced drugs. We need to separate them. This isn't a problem. It doesn't create prestige. They will always be deemed separately. But what does create an issue is when we bring them together in one big group, and we suddenly have all these people who are doing it properly, the right way, in regards to the rules of the actual Olympic Games, and they're getting overshadowed by these people who are doing it against the rules. They've also said that it's going to encourage the use of steroids culturally for little kids and such. We have to compare this to similar activities broadcasters are commonly on TV. Let's look at F1 and boxing. Both sports that, if done without the correct supervision, can be dangerous, similar to the Enhanced Games. But as we said, it is going to be done with this supervision. And that's also what's done in F1 and boxing. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, boxing used to be banned in many countries. But because we practice these safe practices, it can now be done safely. And the same thing would happen with the performance-enhancing drugs. In fact, the F1 is a good example, as they actually put a lot of their money into anti-reckless driving campaigns. And this is very effective, and this is something that the Enhanced Games could also be doing. We need to put this money into, and we need to put this time and attention into showing this is something we have. We have the Enhanced Games. We're not encouraging people to use it, we're actually outlining what are the risks. Because as we know, when people don't know what the risks are because it's not publicised enough, they are more inclined to make mistakes. We also cannot predict the future. We do not know exactly how people will react to the Enhanced Games. We have to look at these trends in popular culture with F1 boxing, and they suggest this will not be an issue. Moreover, there are much more dangerous things that are commonly televised. Gun violence is the #1 killer of children and teens in the United States, yet it is glorified in the media and in video games. We are not comparing this directly to the Enhanced Games, but pointing out that there are far more impactful influences that society has done little about. Where are our priorities? Finally, we need to look at how a lack of education, which comes from not publicising and not having things like the Enhanced Games, actually leads to big issues. Like a 2023 study in Gambia, where they found that greater openness to sexuality and actually talking about it revitalised sexual education and increased an uptake of health services. Now I will summarise our team's case. Our first speaker, Seb, argued that the Enhanced Game provides financial security for athletes, guaranteeing base pay and prize money. He also argued that the Enhanced Game promotes fairness, giving athletes a legitimate platform to compete. Our second speaker, VJ, argued that the Enhanced Games turn secrecy into safety with a more transparent environment. And he also argued that it has environments for medical research and healthcare. In conclusion, the Enhanced Games is a worthwhile endeavour and should be embraced. It provides athletes with financial security, promotes fairness and ensures safety. Regulated performance enhancement. By turning secrecy into safety and establishing scientific research, it transforms risks into opportunity. This is what we need to be doing, not shying away from it. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Ruben Bursell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that the enhanced games is a worthwhile endeavour. We, the negative team, strongly believe that this statement is false. Before I like to sum up my team's case, I'm going to rebut the erroneous assertions made by the opposition team. The first speaker of the affirmative team claimed that the enhanced games were a worthwhile endeavour because the current alternative, the Olympic Games, offer very little financial compensation, and since the enhanced games offer $100,000 a year base pay regardless of performance, enhances economic equity. On its own, this is an accurate statement. However, in the context of things, this does not mean it's a worthwhile endeavour. An analogy would be in Mexico, maybe a local Mexican would earn more working for the drug cartels than finding a local job. However, this does not mean that the drug cartels are a worthwhile endeavour. Just because they pay more does not mean it is necessarily a worthwhile endeavour to society. As mentioned in our definition, which the opposition agreed to when we rebutted the definition, a worthwhile endeavour does not only consider the utility to the employees or to the employers, but to society collectively. The first speaker of the affirmative team also claimed that the enhanced games would enhance fairness, allowing doping since doping already occurs underground. This, as our second speaker mentioned in her rebuttal, commits the naturalistic fallacy. Just because something already occurs, it doesn't necessarily mean that it should be permitted. For example, in foreign invasions, I don't want to get political, but for example, in the US invasion of Iraq, perhaps, maybe, best guess, maybe 1 in 10 US troops looted civilian villages, looted villages in civilian populations. Just because this introduces a degree of unfairness, maybe these 1 in 10 troops that committed this ultimately ended up with more spoils of war than the other 9 in 10 who didn't, does not mean it should be permitted just to make it more fair. Again, this isn't a debate about fairness, this is a debate about social utility, about whether it is a worthwhile endeavour. The second speaker of the affirmative team mentioned that by bringing doping from secrecy into safety, the consumption of performance-enhancing drugs becomes much more safe. They mentioned the health testing that the enhanced games proposes to pursue, the ban on FDA non-approved substances, and a study which indicated that medical professionals approve the enhanced games. The first thing is the health tests are post hoc. They occur after the consumption of the drugs. If the drugs have already been consumed and there's irreversible damage as a result of that consumption, testing, just to make sure that there are no health effects, is futile. I mean, it doesn't do anything. Secondly, the banning on FDA substances that aren't approved by the FDA is not enforced. They don't test this at all. They stipulate it, I guess, so it can be permissible in the US legally, but they have no test. You can't test for very specific drugs. I mean, there are so many drugs that the FDA bans, or so many drugs that the FDA allows. It is impossible and impractical, and it's why they don't do it. The study that was mentioned by the second affirmative speaker did not ask medical professionals whether the enhanced games was a worthwhile endeavour. It asked them whether they were willing to treat and support these athletes. That's not the same thing as false equivalency. If you ask doctors whether they would support someone medically who would overdose on cocaine, of course the majority of them will say yes. It does not mean doctors support the overdosing of cocaine. In his rebuttals, the third affirmative speaker mentioned that drawing the line, like giving examples, as a second affirmative speaker also mentioned, historically caffeine had been banned. It's an inconsistent banning. Where do we draw the line? I mean, obviously it's impractical to assume that any line that distinguishes between banned substances and permitted substances can be drawn correctly and consistently. However, it is better to have a poorly drawn line than no line at all. In the second speaker's argument, he mentioned that by bringing these drugs and the consumption of these drugs in a sporting context out into the open, we can enhance medical research and gain further knowledge into the effects of these drugs, specifically on athletes, I'd like to add. As our second speaker actually mentioned, by shifting the focus of the drugs and pharmaceutical industry onto athletes, it's not necessarily zero-sum, but it won't be strictly additive either. So there's more interest in the pharmaceutical industry. Some of it would have been taken away from medical research and put towards athletic research. Not all of it necessarily. I mean, it does add, but it's not going to be one for one. There will be some consumer interest and some investor interest taken away from medical applications of drugs and towards sporting applications of drugs. The third affirmative speaker also spoke about legality and how historically many things, rebutting our first speaker's point, historically many things that had been illegal weren't necessarily immoral, and many things that had been legal weren't necessarily moral. Our first speaker's argument wasn't about morality at all, it was about practicality, alright? When things are banned, they can't go ahead without breaking the law. It's not necessarily saying the law is a good thing, it is an assessment of practicality and feasibility. Now, the third affirmative speaker in his rebuttal also mentioned the autonomy of the athletes. The athletes aren't necessarily coerced in a strict legal sense into